What is up, everybody? Welcome to the channel. My name's Excoundrel. We are doing a patch 2.2c tier list, including the release of Renekton. We're going to talk through all of the choices for every single lane in this video. Timestamps will be in the description too. I have to say thanks to G2A for sponsoring the channel. And if you want to get involved in a May skin giveaway, make sure that you like, comment and subscribe on this video and as many videos that you see on my channel throughout the month for the highest chance of winning one of 10 skins that I'm giving away that will be shown and drawn at the end in June. Okay, let's get into the tier list. So, what has changed from last patch? Well, of course, we've had the release of Renekton, and I have also included Kha'Zix and Rengar in the release changes too. How much has shifted with the Baron lane meta? Well, I still believe Fiora to be the best Baron laner in the meta right now. She has so many good matchups, very few people beat her, and I think a good Fiora player can absolutely win a game. I still believe Akali has not been nerfed. I still think she's really strong, so Fiora and Akali, super good still. However, I've added a new champion to S+ tier, and it is Gragas. Now, not AP Gragas, because I think AP Gragas is probably in line with some of the other champions in the S tier below. But S+ tier Gragas is Tank Gragas. I think Tank Gragas is absolutely nutty. If you're interested in Tank Gragas, I've got a video coming to the channel over the weekend to make sure you check it out. Tank Gragas is pretty crazy though. In S tier, some familiar faces there like Darius, Camille, Malphite, but I've added a few new faces. Pantheon. I think Pantheon's buffs made him pretty strong, and I think I've seen a lot of really strong Pantheon players in the top lane now, and I do believe him to be a very strong top lane choice. Tank Rengar, I think, is a really good Baron laner too, so I think we can see a lot more Tank Rengar in the meta. And oh my word, have I put Garen in S tier? Yeah, I've got a video coming out about Garen as well. I think if you've seen Hell's Devil's video on Garen, you'll understand. Garen is actually quite strong and does beat a lot of the meta champions, especially when using the rune Grasp of the Undying. So I think Garen is actually a bit of a sleeper Baron lane pick right now. He's still played quite a lot in competitive, and I do believe him to be a very strong choice. In A tier, familiar faces like Wukong, Olaf. I've moved Singed back up again because he has been proving to be pretty strong. However, the new champion, Renekton, why is he just in A tier? He's actually not very strong. There is a lot of things that are wrong with Renekton's kit right now, including the fact that he doesn't actually heal for that much with his first ability. It's a flat healing that doesn't scale with AD. He also can't really cancel his animations, which Renekton really relies on animation cancels to ensure that he gets DPS output. And in general, he just feels a little weaker compared to his PC counterparts. I'm hoping for some Renekton buffs to see him be a bit more viable. I've moved Vayne back down. I've moved Teemo down to C tier, even though a Teemo one trick can still be very scary. What I mean by one trick is that someone plays this champion only, and therefore they have a very good mastery of that champion. Teemo can be pretty strong, but I've never lost a lane to a Teemo. Like, if you're losing, you just play it safe, and then when you get to team fights, Teemo doesn't do anything. And I moved Diana down as well. B tier is still pretty consistent with the likes of Jax, Mundo, and Nasus. I don't believe Nasus is particularly strong. I still think Renekton is actually stronger than Nasus. Nasus is still one of those champions that just doesn't do anything for the entire game and then eventually comes out with 15 minutes with stacks and starts hitting people. But he's still weak to CC, can still be kited pretty easily. So that's my Baron lane choices. Shall we move on to the next lane, which is the jungle? So let's head over to the jungle. Okay, into the jungle we go. The jungle has changed a little bit from the previous patch. That is with the introduction of Rengar. Lee Sin, I believe, still remains one of the best junglers in the meta, alongside Rengar. Believe it or not, Rengar, I thought Kha'Zix might be better than Rengar, but Rengar is ridiculously good in Wild Rift. There are a couple of reasons for Rengar being so good. The first of which is his clear speed is absolutely obnoxiously quick. Because his first ability counts as an empowered basic attack, you get the cone damage with the empowered basic attack, and then obviously you just have a quick clear speed from there on out as well. And him having a quick clear speed means that he can hit level 5 really quickly. And one of the things that made Rengar relatively weak in PC League of Legends is that he didn't hit level 6 quickly because, you know, he wasn't a jungler before level 6. However, in Wild Rift, it really only takes him a matter of minutes before he can hit level 5, and then he's ganking people with his ultimate, and that's the bit where he becomes really strong. The Evelynn nerf, I think, did enough to kind of unseat her from the top two. I think Lee Sin and Rengar are really strong into Evelynn, and I think Evelynn has dropped off a little bit, but she's still an incredibly good solo queue jungler, and I still think Evelynn is very strong. Jarvan's still up there, Wukong's still up there. A new face in S tier, though, is Camille. I was a little skeptical on Camille jungle. On the previous patch, I put her down in C tier, I believe. However, I've seen more and more high elo players play her. I've seen a lot more of her in pro play. And I realized, actually, again, for the same reason of Rengar, even though her clear speed's a lot slower than Rengar's, you can still get level 5 relatively quickly. And at level 5, Camille ganks are absolutely unmatched. And in the late game, it's really good for either peeling for your AD carry or getting aggressive onto a particular target, because the Hextech Ultimatum is such a good lockdown tool. In A tier, I've moved Shyvana down to A tier, by the way. I've moved Shyvana down to A tier. I really don't rate Shyvana anymore. I've seen a lot of Shyvana being played in the games that I've had in solo queue, and she just doesn't feel strong. I think they've nerfed her too hard now, and I don't think she's a high tier jungler. I still think she can work. As I said, A tier still means that she's good. Like, you can still play her, but she's not very good, or she's not broken. And that's also the tier that you'll find Kha'Zix in. Even though I think Kha'Zix is good, I don't think he's as strong as his other counterpart. I think Rengar is firmly in the lead in terms of power level. And because the Wild Rift map is so small, I think it's difficult for Kha'Zix to find opportunities to get isolated targets and kill them. It's not like Evelynn, where you can walk up to a target even if they're not alone and burst them with your ultimate. Kha'Zix really needs to find people by himself. And I think that's a bit more difficult to do in Wild Rift. And also, it's very team fight heavy. And those team fights don't favor Kha'Zix as a champion, in my opinion. Rammus, he's just okay. He's just okay. Darius, I've moved up. I've seen quite a few Darius jungles, but I don't think he's like as insane as Camille, for instance. I've moved Jax up to A tier. The reason I've moved Jax up to A tier is actually he's a good answer into Rengar jungle. Jax is actually a relatively good answer into Rengar jungle, so that's why I moved Jax up to A tier. Other than that, of course, Master Yi is bad, and Tryndamere also. All right, let's move on to the mid lane now. Not a huge number of changes in the mid lane. Because there is no Katarina nerfs, and the Diana nerf, honestly, it made absolutely zero difference to Diana. I still think they remain two of the best mid laners in the game right now. Just in, especially for people who can play them. I think at lower elos, Katarina is a lot harder to play properly, and you won't get as many good Katarina players. But when we're looking at just like the top level of play, I still believe Katarina to be insanely good in solo queue. I think in competitive, she's a little different. I think it's a little bit easier to deal with Katarina in competitive. My tier lists are not actually aimed for competitive players. If you're playing competitive, you're always going to pick something that's utility focused. Like Ziggs, for instance. Ziggs is like S+ tier in competitive because he just takes towers so quickly. Corki's really strong. Orianna is really strong. These kind of assassin picks that are better in solo queue are not as consistent in pro play because people are a bit more adept at dealing with them. But I still believe in solo queue, Katarina and Diana to be two of the best mid lanes that we have. But there are loads of just good mid laners, like Akali, Orianna, Corki, Ziggs, Galio, and I've actually moved Ahri up to S tier because I've seen a lot of Ahri recently, and actually she has like a lot of strong matchups in the mid lane, and now people are kind of using her to be more roam heavy and trying to sort of influence the side lanes a bit more. People have realized that roaming on Ahri is good. I'm seeing her be a lot more effective as a champion. So I think Ahri, again, she doesn't have many bad matchups either. Like Ahri really doesn't have many bad matchups. Twisted Fate, I think he's on the cusp of being S tier. I think the red card buff did a little bit for him, but it didn't suddenly make him absolutely nutty. A good Twisted Fate player can still really, really, really influence the game. The thing about Twisted Fate that makes him good is his ability at level 5 to just go to another lane and gank. And especially in combination with Rengar, he's really strong in that sense that you can get a double gank setup. But I just think that he's a little weak in some teamfight scenarios, and I think there are a lot of mid laners right now that have a lot more influence in terms of AoE teamfight potential. And I think, a good Twisted Fate player, he's highlighted in red for a reason. A good Twisted Fate player will make him feel like he's S+ tier. But I think overall, I think he's just he's like good. He's just very good. He's at the very high end of A tier. And if I was doing the in-between tiers, he would definitely be between A and S. I just think he's like, he's okay. Seraphine's still there, and you can see the rest of the picks. I've moved Tristana down a little bit. I don't think Tristana really materialized into anything. And Renekton is an A tier mid laner only because he counters certain matchups. Like I will pick a Renekton into something like a Zed or a Yasuo or a Katarina or a Diana, for instance. But he's just not strong enough to really abuse those matchups to its fullest potential yet. So, and I think Renekton just needs a bit of love before he can sort of really take over the game. I just want to see some Renekton buffs on the next patch, which unfortunately is quite far away. All right, let's move into AD carry, and lo and behold, nothing's really changed. There wasn't really many big sweeping changes to AD carry in the last patch. The Kai'Sa nerfs, they genuinely mean diddly squat. I really don't think those Kai'Sa nerfs were designed to do what they were supposed to do. In fact, I actually just don't think the buffs and nerfs in the last patch were good at all. I really don't think Riot hit the right areas. Like for Diana, her passive attack speed was not the problem. Yeah, okay, she took turrets a little bit quickly in the late game, but it wasn't the problem. The problem is the ridiculous scaling on her ult damage. Like, if she gets a fully charged ultimate off, she's doing like 50,000 damage. That was the problem with Diana. It's got nothing to do with her passive attack speed. Anyway, ranting over. Kai'Sa, Ezreal, and Xayah. They're all still the best AD carries in the meta, in my opinion. They all are relatively good in any scenario also. Your S tier champions still remain the same. Jinx, Corki, who is definitely being picked more as an AD carry as well. Draven and Jhin. I think Jhin just on the cusp of S tier. I think he could be A tier. There's an argument that he's maybe not as strong as the three that you see in front of him. A tier, Tristana, Varus, and Miss Fortune. I do think Varus is good. I especially think in competitive, Varus has got a lot of stock because his ultimate is incredibly useful. I do think that his damage output is a little lackluster, and so therefore in solo queue you're not really seeing much of him. There is this kind of weird hybrid Varus build. I don't think full AP Varus is any good, but I think there's like this hybrid Varus build that you can play. There's kind of like on-hit Varus, where you play like Blade of the Ruin King and Nash's Tooth, and you kind of rely on his blighted quiver stacks, which you end up maxing first to be like the main damage source. But yeah, I think overall that this is a relatively unchanged AD carry tier list, because really there hasn't been many changes to the AD carries. Like, I still believe that you, in most of your high tier games, you're going to see Kai'Sa, Ezreal, and Xayah, and then on the end of that you might sometimes see a Jinx, especially when paired up with Lulu. Jinx Lulu is starting to creep back into the meta a little bit. But we'll move over to the support, speaking of Lulu, because again, there are some things that we want to talk about here. I think the two best supports in the meta remain Braum and Janna. I think Braum slightly edging out Janna at the top end of the support list. I think a lot of people are putting Alistar lower down than S tier. I still think Alistar is an S tier support. I just think that he's not played as much right now because Braum and Janna, who are some of Alistar's biggest counters, are being played quite frequently. But into a lot of matchups, Alistar still remains incredibly good. And so I still think Alistar has a place in the meta. I really love Galio support. I rate him much higher than his mid lane counterpart. I think Galio support is really strong. I think Lux support actually didn't really take that much of a hit. It was only the shield that, on coming back of her shield, that got nerfed. And I still think Lux support remains really strong. I still think her shielding is actually really insane. So, you know, I don't think Lux support is actually going anywhere, and I still expect to see it be picked in competitive. I've moved Seraphine up because I'm actually really rating Seraphine right now. However, I won't blind pick Seraphine. I'll pick Seraphine into matchups like Braum, or I'll pick Seraphine into matchups against other enchanters, but I will not pick Seraphine into things like Leona, maybe Alistar, maybe even Galio, because if you put 1 foot wrong against an engaged support as Seraphine, you're going to die. But into like Janna, into Nami, Lulu, Sona, I will pick Seraphine because it's a really easy pick, and you're going to have much more utility than those guys because of your ultimate as the game goes on. Leona, super good. I think the buffs on the patch previous to this really put her in a great spot. I've actually really enjoyed playing Leona recently. And again, Alistar, like I said. A tier, Nami, Rakan, Lulu, who's coming back with Lulu Jinx, and Sona. I'm seeing way more Sona now, I think, because obviously as enchanters become more popular, the people that kind of can punish Sona more easily are not being played as much, so Sona's coming back. Blitzcrank Pantheon, I think even with the Pantheon buffs, I don't think he's an insane support right now. I think because of the changes to his third ability, where you can no longer power it for damage reduction for longer, a little bit awkward to make him work as a support. And then obviously people like Soraka. Soraka still needs some much needed buffs. She's not in a great spot. This is the end of the tier list, though. I think, personally, I feel like this is a relatively sort of good balance between competitive and solo queue. I tried to draw from my own personal experience, watching pro play, looking at high elos, match histories. But I think this is like, especially the S and S plus tiers, you're not going to go wrong picking a champion from those two tiers in any of these respective roles if you want to climb ELO. And I hope this was useful to you, and I will see you on the next tier list, which will be, I think, in quite some time, unless anything majorly changes on this patch. I think it'll be quite some time before we get the next tier list, mainly because it's going to be 3 weeks until the next patch. So I thought I'd get it out early, enjoy it, and I'll see you soon.